Hello and welcome to this week's ARCA Menards Series Rewind Show. I'm Garth Allen. This is Racing News Now. And today we're talking about the return to the Milwaukee Mile in almost 15 years for the ARCA Menards Series. A great historic day at this historic track, the 2021 Sprecher 150. If you haven't seen our coverage from yesterday, it is linked down below in the description. A chat with ARCA PR Director Charlie Krull about this week's Drew Dollar penalty, him clearing up the series viewpoint on that, the Drew Dollar, Kevin Reed Sr. and Kevin Reed Jr. penalties, as well as a winner interview. So, if you have not seen the race and don't know who won, don't go down there just yet and spoil yourself on who won the race. Wait until we've at least gotten through the results before you go down there to check that out. So, let's talk about this one. 150 laps around that historic mile track in West Allis, Wisconsin, just outside of Milwaukee. What a good race this was. I mean, it wasn't a fantastic race. We had one driver absolutely run away with it. We've seen that a few times this year. That tends to happen sometimes in this series, especially with competition level that we have right now with basically 2 or 3 certain drivers that tend to run away with some of these races. It doesn't always happen, but we've had a few races like this year. Not surprising. We had some good races back in the pack. I'm not saying this race as a whole was terrible. We had some good racing. Milwaukee showed that it can put on some good racing, and I really hope that ARCA continues to go back to Milwaukee for years to come now. From the sounds of things, that should be happening. This shouldn't be a one-off race. That we should keep having Milwaukee races into the future for ARCA, which is great to see. I would love to see it get back on other schedules, IndyCar, Xfinity, Trucks, USAC, things like that. I would love to see those series get back to the Milwaukee Mile as well, and I would love to see ARCA continue going back to this track because I think it has a lot of potential, and I think we could see some really good races here in the future. So let's look at your caution report for this race. 3 caution flags, total of 14 laps. This one went pretty quick, didn't have a lot of cautions. 2 of those obviously were your scheduled breaks at 51 and 101. And then the only caution for an incident came at lap 118 when the 12 of Stephanie Moyer spun off of turn 2 off the front bumper of Corey Heim. That's 2 races in a row now. Corey Heim has been involved in an incident like that. Remember back to Springfield last week when he was leading and ended up spinning the 11 car in turns 3 and 4 at Springfield. Seems to be a pattern developing here. I'm not saying Corey is doing these things intentionally. Clearly, he owned up to the Springfield incident when we chatted with him earlier this week, said it was his fault. Just got to racing a little bit too hard because he knew Taylor Gray was catching up to him. Not sure what exactly happened here, but I tend not to think that Corey did this intentionally by any means, but definitely a pattern starting to develop here. 2 races in a row where this kind of thing has happened with Corey Heim. Lap leaders on the day. And before we flash this up, this is going to tell you exactly who won this race because this driver led every lap in this race. That driver is Ty Gibbs. He led all 150 laps in the Sprecher 150. Absolute domination. There were different points in this race where I really felt like a couple of drivers really could have competed with him. There were drivers, especially as we got into closer to breaks, where it really felt like there were drivers putting down better lap times. As we got longer runs going, it really felt like there were some drivers that late in a run really were faster than Ty. I don't know if that's because Ty's handling really went away late in a run, and that's where I really feel like these breaks are really hurting ARCA right now. Yes, I know why they're there. They're to save these teams money so that they can not spend the money on pit crews. But man, this makes me want to get rid of breaks and bring back live pit stops sooner rather than later because I really feel like the breaks really hindered this race. If this race had been allowed to go on naturally, have pit stops when it was meant to, or when we just had natural cautions, I think this race might have played out a little differently because it just didn't seem like Ty was quite as fast on the long runs as he was on the short runs. About the time we'd hit that 50 lap mark, it seemed like he was starting to fall back to everybody, but we never really got the chance to really see that play out because we never really got to see a full run play out because of the brakes. So this is my plea to ARCA. I know we're trying to save teams money, but now that we're kind of coming out of the COVID period, I hope that sooner rather than later, we're really looking at getting these live pit stops back on track, because I think at this point, I feel like the brakes are almost hurting the series more than they're helping the series. So let's look at your results. Obviously, as we know, Ty Gibbs has won this race as he led every lap. What you're going to notice here on these results, Corey Heim is not in close pursuit like he is in most of these races. You'll see him down in 6th place, and actually just took 6th in the last couple laps from Jesse Love in this race. Otherwise, it really looked like he was going to finish 7th and then lose even more points. And with Ty having a max points day with the pole, leading the most laps, and winning the race, not a good day for Corey in the points. We see Sam Mayer there in 2nd. He and Daniel Dye had a really tight battle for 2nd there in the closing laps. A couple more laps, and I think Daniel actually could have taken that 2nd spot. Really good run for Sam Mayer in that 23 car. It's been a little bit of an off year for him this year. Not put up the greatest results in that 8 car in Xfinity yet this year. Not had the greatest runs in the Brett Holmes Racing truck or ARCA car so far this year. Finally able to put a really good run underneath him in that 23 car, and hopefully this builds some momentum now into his next ARCA race, as he told us post-race would be Bristol, or he thought it would be Bristol. He had to think on it for a second. He thought it was going to be Bristol. I tend to believe that is probably the case, and that is, as we've seen in the past, one of his best tracks, and I think, from my understanding, one of his favorite tracks that he loves to go to. So I believe he's actually running a triple header at that race, ARCA, Trucks, and Xfinity. So could be a good weekend for Sam Mayer coming up here at Bristol in a couple of weeks. Daniel Dye had to slot into 3rd at the end of the race. Taylor Gray had a good run all day, ended up in 4th. And Sammy Smith, very disappointed with a 5th place run. He was very disappointed with a 5th place run. He was right there with Ty most of the day speed-wise, and unfortunately got caught back in the pack and never really could get back from that point. Started on the outside pole, was fastest in practice, had some real speed under him, and he really believed that at worst he was a 2nd place car, and unfortunately wasn't quite able to show that in the latter parts of the race, and ended up still coming home with a top 5 finish, which helps him tremendously in the East Series points, as this was a Combo East race. Definitely puts a gap on Mason Diaz, who you do not see here in the top 10, but you do see Daniel Dye, who came into this race 3rd in East points. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes up the East points leaving this race. Rest of your top 10, Corey Heim, a disappointing run, lands him in 6th. Really off day, it seemed like, for all of Venturini Motorsports, because you'll see Jesse Love here in 7th, Joey East 8th, Thad Moffitt 9th, and then you'll see the 3rd Venturini car, Gracie Trotter, rounding out the top 10. It just seemed like all 3 of them were really off today. They never really could figure out the setup for this track. It was a very disappointing day for those VMS Toyotas. 11th through 20th, Parker Retzlaff lands in the 11th position. Off day for Rev Racing, as well as you'll see Nick Sanchez in 12th and Raja Carruth in 13th. Raja Carruth had an announcement earlier today that he is going Xfinity Racing next year with the newly renamed Alpha Prime Racing, what is now Tommy Joe Martin's team, Martin's Motorsports. So congratulations to Raja Carruth for that, for getting a few Xfinity races next season. I don't believe that will be all of his plans for next year, but good to see that he is moving up to running some Xfinity races next year. Max Gutierrez landed in the 15th position, Connor Mozak there in 16th, and a disappointing run for Mason Diaz. Very off all day, ended up 10 laps down in the 19th position. And then final page, 21st through 24th, all of these drivers retiring early on in the race with different mechanical issues, or in Arnott Koch's instance, did not start the race. So that's your results from the Sprecher 150. Since we were at the track, obviously no winner interview this week because we already did it at the track. Again, it is linked down below in the description if you want to hear Ty's thoughts after this race, his thoughts on this day. And we also asked him what his thoughts are heading into DuQuoin next weekend, so you get to hear about that as well. Dirt, not really his forte, so an interesting thought process for Ty going into that race, just trying not to lose very many points. As we look at the main ARCA Menards Series points following this race, he's got a bit of a buffer now, which helps headed into DuQuoin, where it seems that Corey is probably the favorite, and Ty may not run very well at DuQuoin. So this is going to help Ty heading into that race. An 11-point lead now over Corey Heim after his max points day from Milwaukee. And then a subsequently disappointing day from Corey Heim landed him in an 11-point hole after Milwaukee. Your battle for third now, Thad Moffitt and Nick Sanchez. That gap has grown slightly to a 21-point gap that Thad Moffitt holds over Nick Sanchez. Neither of these drivers, from my understanding, will be at DuQuoin this week. Neither one of them were at Springfield last week. And I do believe Thad has sold the Salem race sponsorship-wise. So I do believe DuQuoin will be the last race he misses this year. And I believe that will also be the last race Nick Sanchez misses. So this truly is their own little points battle. At this point, they're not battling for the championship after missing both dirt races. They truly are in a battle for third. Be interesting to keep an eye on this as we continue through the season. What's interesting, if you look at their stats this season, Nick Sanchez actually has more top fives this season. 7 top fives compared to Thad Moffitt's 5 top fives. But Thad has one more top 10 at 12, where Nick Sanchez only has 11 top 10. So the stats would tend to suggest that Nick Sanchez maybe should have a bit of a points lead with more top 5 runs. Not the case, though. So interesting to look through the stats and see actually how the points lay out in this case. With no Drew Dollar this week, he falls to 7th behind D.L. Wilson, who now moves up to the 6th position in points. And Jesse Love has finally moved into the top 10 in main ARCA Menards Series points. All right, so that's your main ARCA points following Milwaukee, but we've got another set of points to look at now. That is the ARCA Menards Series East points, of which Sammy Smith came in leading and had the possibility to clinch the championship leaving this race. The question is, did he clinch the championship? The answer to that is tricky. Realistically, yes, I think he has clinched the championship. Realistically. Mathematically, he has not. As we look at the points here, he has a 24-point lead now over Daniel Dye. Mason Diaz has fallen to 2nd, minus 33, with Joey Easton 4th, Max Gutierrez 5th. Realistically, I think a 24-point gap headed into Bristol probably clinches Sammy Smith the championship. Mathematically, not necessarily, especially since we don't know how many cars are going to show up to Bristol. There may be enough cars at Bristol that if Sammy has a bad day and Daniel has a really good day, hypothetically, that could swing at Bristol if there's enough cars there. So you can't necessarily give Sammy the championship just yet. For all intents and purposes, as long as he doesn't have a very bad day at Bristol, Sammy Smith is probably your 2021 ARCA Menards Series East champion. Again, can't hand it to him just yet. It would almost take a miracle on Daniel Dye's part, I think, to win this championship. He's not technically out of it yet, but it would take a very interesting day at Bristol for both him and Sammy Smith for Daniel to pick up this championship. That is your ARCA Menards Series East points following Milwaukee, and I believe that will finally do it for us today on this ARCA Rewind show. We got a lot to talk about in these combo races, and again, Bristol's going to be another one of those that is a joint main ARCA East and Sioux Chief Showdown race, earning 3 sets of championship points in all of these races. It gets a little confusing. I know it does. It gets confusing for me. So it is what it is. That's the schedule they gave us, and apparently that's the schedule going forward for East Series into the future. So I guess we should just get used to it at this point. So it is what it is, but good weekend of racing at Milwaukee. Good to see cars back on that track, and hopefully that continues into the future. I hope, like I said earlier, I really hope this isn't a one-off, but from the sounds of things, it's not going to be. It sounds like ARCA is committed to going to Milwaukee into the future. Whether that means other series will go back to Milwaukee, I don't know, but it does sound like ARCA will continue to be at Milwaukee into the future. Really, we don't know that until the 2022 schedule comes out, but that is the sounds of things, is this won't be a one-and-done for Milwaukee, which will be nice to see. Coming up this week, of course, we have iRacing Tuesday tomorrow. Working on getting a driver for that. Not 100% sure if that's going to happen yet, but I've got a couple drivers in mind for that if one of them doesn't work out. So we'll see exactly how that works out to see who we can maybe get tomorrow. If we don't get anybody, then, of course, we'll have a Carb Cup or a Pickup Cup race. we'll see how that works out, as sometimes they work out better than others. If you've ever done a Carb Cup or a Pickup Cup race, you know what I'm talking about. That's probably about it. We'll be back at DuQuoin next weekend for some more slinging dirt fun. And then we only got 4 ARCA races left this year, so we're getting right down to the nitty-gritty. If Corey is going to dig out of that hole that he put himself in here at Milwaukee, he's going to have to do it at DuQuoin, and he's really going to have to keep plugging away at it. He's not only going to have to, he's got to win at DuQuoin. There's no question about it. He's got to win at DuQuoin, and he's really got to hope that Ty doesn't have a great day at DuQuoin to really cut into that lead. But then he's probably got to win at Bristol and Salem too, if we're being realistic right now. He's probably at least got to win those 2 to even give himself a chance going into Kansas. We'll see how this works out. We know both of them are good at Kansas. Ty won there earlier this year. Corey won that race last year, the fall race. So it's going to be a toss-up. It's all going to come down to how Bristol and Salem go, I think. So we'll see how this plays out. This is going to be, like I've said, this is going to be an interesting championship battle. It has been so fun to watch, and it's not over yet by any means. It's definitely not over yet. Corey, I think, will pull out of this hole, and we're still going to get a good championship battle headed into Kansas. But at that, as always, we want to thank our Patreon supporter, Regional Manager William Holmes. Thank you, as always, for your support. It is greatly appreciated. If you would like to be a patron of RNN, the link is down below in the description, patreon.com/racingnewsnow. Not required by any means, but it's definitely appreciated when you want to support RNN in that way. But that's going to do it for this one. So at that, this has been the ARCA Menards Series Rewind Show. I'm Garth Allen for Racing News Now.